Shri Devi.
Hare Krishna, please accept my humble obeisances, dear Bhutabhavana Prabhu, and welcome, welcome, welcome. Dear devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada and all glories to our amazing Guru Parampara. Welcome to His Holiness Candramauli Swami Maharaj's daily class. We are so glad to have His Grace Bhutabhavana Prabhu to give us class today and enlighten us on this wonderful topic of Canto 1, Chapter 15, the Pandavas retire timely. Bhutabhavana Prabhu needs no introduction, but still I will say a few words. Disciple of His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami. He is a mentor, guide, coach, as well to individuals, institutions, organizations, and is a traveling preacher for Krishna consciousness. Is married to his wonderful wife Bhakti Gamya, whom I met just a few days back in Govardhan Eco Village. So we are very thankful to have him here. We humbly request everybody to really get involved in the class and ask nice questions, because you will really get a lot of clarification, enlightenment, and purification. Over to you, Bhakti Bhutabhavana Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Sri Devi. Thank you for very kind words. And my wife mentioned that she saw you. I was speaking to her on the phone. She said, "Oh, I saw Sri Devi. It was wonderful to see her." She was glowing in her praise and admiration for you, actually. So it's really wonderful to see you as well. So I'm going to say one or two things up front. So I'm going to keep this class relatively short today. Okay, forgive me for doing so, just because I did have a little bit of a clash in terms of time, but I will, of course, still honor the class and take any questions. And so wonderful, as always, wherever the Bhagavatam, wherever you land in the Bhagavatam, it's just yeah, wonderful. Nectar, yeah. Okay, so we'll say quick prayer. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So as Shri Devi said, we'll be reading from first canto, chapter 15, text number 29. So I'll read the verse, translation, purport, and then share a few words and open up for questions. Vasudevan Vasudevan Griyanudyan Paribrim Hitaram Hasa Bhaktya Niyamat Tita Shesha Bhaktya Niyama Titas Shesha Kashaya Dishano Arjunaha. Okay. Vasudeva Angri, the lotus feet of the Lord. Anudhyana, by constant remembrance. Paribrim Hita, expanded. Ramhasa, with great velocity. Bhaktya, in devotion. Nirmatita, subsided. Ashesha, unlimited. Kashaya, dint. Dishanaha, conception. Arjunaha, Arjun. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Arjuna's constant remembrance of the lotus feet of Lord Sri Krishna rapidly increased his devotion, and as a result, all the trash in his thoughts subsided. Purple. Material desires in the mind are the trash of material contamination. By such contamination, the living being is faced with so many compatible and incompatible things that discourage the very existence of spiritual identity. Birth after birth, the conditioned soul is entrapped with so many pleasing and displeasing elements, which are all false and temporary. They accumulate due to our reactions to material desires. But when we get in touch with the transcendental Lord, in his variegated energies by devotional service, the naked forms of all material desires become manifest, and the intelligence of the living being is pacified in its true color. As soon as Arjuna turned his attention towards the instructions of the Lord, as they are inculcated in the Bhagavad Gita, his true color of eternal association with the Lord became manifest, and thus he felt freed from all material contaminations. This is such a beautiful and powerful teaching. So, Omegyanata Mirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chekshur Militam Yinatasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uttapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sakrachatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vatam Twam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishikamvitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sutta Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchikapadrabhyas Cha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so let's dive into this. This is such a powerful verse in purple. We're being given the naked truth, as Prabhupada touches upon that point in the purple. The naked forms of all material desires become manifest. That means our material desires are alien to us. They're actually they're all the causes of our suffering, right? That's what's actually being explained here. And material desires are the clear evidence of material contamination, okay? As Prabhupada begins the purple, material desires in the mind are the trash of material contamination. In other words, to the extent that we don't have material desires, to that extent our minds are pure. And to the extent that our minds are pure, to that extent we're able to more easily act on the basis of the soul, which is our true self. How do we make the mind pure? Krishna again and again explains this point. In the Bhagavad Gita, what does Krishna tell Arjuna? He explains first of all that we're suffering because of the mind. Mamai vamso jiva loke, jiva bhuta sanatana. Mana means mind. Manashishtan indriyani, prakriti shtani kashati. He says that we're struggling. Kashati means struggling. But with what? Mana, mind, shishtani, 6 indriyani, senses. We're struggling with the 6 senses, including the mind. Isn't that an amazing insight? That the mind is actually the 6th sense. It is the king of the senses. And we know that the mind, manda samanda manda bhagya, in the purport to Bhagavatam, Prabhupada would explain that their minds in Kali Yuga are always disturbed. How do we get out of it? How do we change this? And this is the desperate struggle that we all have in this world. Our desperate struggle in this world is the struggle of the impure mind. Because when the mind is fully polluted with these material desires, we become a slave. We're forced to spend all of our life chasing after these materialistic things which don't give us any lasting joy. But the solution is also here. This verse says, Arjuna's constant remembrance on the lotus feet of Lord Sri Krishna rapidly increased his devotion, and as a result, all the trash in his thoughts subsided. This is the cleaning process. This is exactly what Lord Chaitanya came to give when he spoke about Cheto, Darpana, Marjanam, how to clean the mirror of the mind. And he reflects back what Krishna tells Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. Maya sakta mana pata. Asakta mana. Asakta means attachment. Mana means mind. With your mind, he says to Arjuna, you should have your mind attached to me. Okay? Man mana bhava mad bhakto. Right? He's explaining throughout, always worship me, offer obeisances unto me. Krishna, throughout the Bhagavad Gita, he's explaining spiritual psychology. This verse is so nectarian, sweet, juicy, insightful, exciting, practical. Look at that. This is how we're going to become ourselves again. This is how we're going to become ourselves again, because we're going to be engaging this constant remembrance on the lotus feet of Lord Sri Krishna. But that statement is so deep and is so profound, because Krishna is so kind, Lord Chaitanya is so kind, that there are many ways to remember Krishna. We can remember Krishna through remembering our spiritual master's instructions. We can remember him through service. We can remember him through hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita. We can remember him through chanting. Yeah? So there are many ways in which we remember Krishna. But as long as we do it sincerely and properly, we will see the same phal. Phal means fruit. It means result. That we will see this same fruit that's being explained here. This is why this teaching is so it's just so incredible, because not only does it give the knowledge, the sambandha, but it also gives the abhideya, right? So the practice, but it also gives the prayojana. It gives the result of the practice. Why? The reason it does that is because then you can understand, am I applying this properly? So it's an entire ecosystem. Sambandha, this is the knowledge, this is the wisdom. Abhideya, this is the practice of that wisdom. Prayojana, if you have this proper understanding and you engage in this activity properly with that proper understanding. By the way, understanding also means attitude. Right? Prabhupada in one place will talk about how everything depends on the attitude of the practitioner. It's a formula. It's an eternal or universal formula. You have the proper understanding and attitude, plus you have the proper behavior, right? The proper execution of practice, abhideya. And if you do these two things properly, if you add these two things together, it will create a certain prayojan. It will create a certain outcome. And what is the outcome being spoken of here? If we constantly remember Krishna, the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, then the outcome will be an increased devotion. Okay? Our devotion will increase. And the other outcome will be, as much as the devotion is increasing, what does it say? All the trash in our thoughts will subside. All the things in the consciousness that torture us. In other words, everything that we struggle with in this world, everything that we struggle with in this world is in the heart, is in the mind. You see, this is such a deep thing. Please try to understand this. Practically, at this time in the world, 99.9% of the population think that I'm struggling because of external situations. It is the greatest trick or illusion that the material energy has pulled. And because they think that the struggle is because of external factors, they spend all their time and energy on these external factors. And ironically, no one notices that while we're spending all this time and energy on all of these external factors, we're becoming more and more unhappy. It's not working. Where we are focused, and again, that's why Sambandha Abhideya Prayojana, you need to know what's meant to be the outcome, because that's how you test if the process is working. Or more specifically, that's how we test if the application of the process is working. You see, there's a process and then there's the application of the process. But in order to make a proper analysis, one must have prayojana. No question, right? We must know, what is it meant to produce? And then I look into my own life, is that the effect that I'm seeing? Because if it is the effect that I'm seeing, then I know this is good. I keep leaning into it. If it's not the effect that I'm seeing, then I have to look, am I applying this process properly? And that's why spiritual life becomes just thrilling. It becomes thrilling because we can always check in and see, and we can always refine our application of the practice. Some devotees, they're doing the application, but because the attitude isn't proper, they're not making the progress that they could. Other devotees, they're doing the application, but their understanding isn't proper. So they're not making the progress that they could. In some cases, the devotee has the proper understanding and the proper attitude, but they're just not engaging in their practice properly. And therefore, they're not making the progress that they could. But this is such a beautiful thing because we don't have a blind belief system. We have exactly what Krishna told Arjuna. And if you look at the pages of the Bhagavatam properly, again and again, Krishna confirms exactly what he told Arjuna. What did he tell Arjuna? Adhyatma Vidya Vidyanam. He says, of sciences, I'm the supreme science of self-realization. You and I, we've never been let down by Krishna. Isn't that amazing? Think about that carefully. We've never been let down by Krishna at all. Everything he's told us is true, and it's true as long as we apply it properly. I was sent a very wonderful quote, and then I'll open up the questions. And it was about whether we can realize the truth just by philosophy. And the point was actually no. According to Ramanuja, a philosophy is not conclusive. So therefore, what is the purpose of Sambandha? Again, if you look at Sambandha Abhideya Prayojana, the purpose of Sambandha is Abhideya, actually. In other words, Prabhupada, what did Prabhupada said? He said, I wrote all these books just to convince everyone to chant the holy name. The purpose of the Sambandha Gyan is to give people the conviction, the logic, the reason to engage wholeheartedly in Abhideya. Right? Therefore, it's that if you're convinced, one who is convinced in our philosophy, what do? The convinced devotee engages in service. In fact, not just that, the convinced devotee will serve his heart out, right? But that service has a special quality. People don't want to talk about this in our movement. But you can be engaged in so-called service, but it's all about your false ego. I'm doing it because I want likes. I'm doing it because I want followers. I'm doing it because I'm desperately insecure. And I think that if I get lots of attention from people, I'll suddenly get all the love and attention that I didn't get when I was growing up. And then I have the audacity and the arrogance to pretend that that's pure service. It's cheating. Right? Of course, it's better than nothing. But we should be honest and humble and say, look, I know that what I'm doing is very contaminated. I'm trying to get beyond that. Then it's like, right, then the Madhyams can respect that because at least it's honest. At least it's humble. Okay? So we're meant to be practicing like this, right? We're meant to we're meant to understand that our material desires is a sign of our material pollution. And that if we keep practicing and engaging in devotional service according to Guru Sadhu Shastra, you will find the ultimate disappearing act. What do I mean? It means our material desires will disappear and our spiritual desires will flourish. The real desires of the soul will come out. And that's an exciting stage of life to achieve. So let's work hard and do everything we can to achieve it. Okay, let me stop there and open up for questions and comments. Any questions or comments?
Thank you. Thank you, as always, for a succinct, brilliant class. I love those 3 points which you made about knowledge, understanding, and application, that everything has to be in place. Because if you may have 1 or 2, you don't have the right attitude, or you don't have the right understanding, or you don't do the application correctly, you're not going to achieve the desired result. Also loved it that how dynamic spiritual life is and how exciting it can be when we spiritualize all our desires, and then we are just like miracles, seeing miracles happen. So thank you for a wonderful class, Bhutabhavana Prabhu. And we have Namrata. Please go ahead, Namrata Prabhu.
Haribol, Namrata.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you very much. This is really useful. So, coming to the point, when you told that attitude, application, and understanding, everything should be proper for the abhideya. So, how do we check that thing?
Yeah.
How do we check that?
So the real thing is, we introspect when we hear. In fact, I would say something different. Rather than checking that, we should always be thinking, how can I refine it? Okay? So it's a journey, meaning that we're not just, like, what does Prabhupada talk about? This Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam. He doesn't say, well, you know, one day you can do Shravanam, and then after that you can stop. You don't have to hear anymore. He doesn't say one day you do Kirtanam, and then after Kirtan, you know, you do, you know, so maybe you went to one Kirtan and then that's, you know, you did it. I did the Shravanam Kirtanam. It's not like that. Actually, it's a constant refinement. You see? Ahoy tukiya pratiyata yatmasu prasidati. When Bhagavatam says, it's so beautifully succinct, that devotional service should be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self. So what that gives us a clue towards is that this is a constant process. You know, if we're regularly hearing, you'll automatically refine your understanding of Krishna consciousness, because every time you hear a new class or read something, you learn something new. So it's not just, is it good or not? It's like, it's getting constantly refined, because the knowledge of our teachings is non-different from Krishna. And because Krishna is always expanding, then Anandam Buddhivardhanam, this ocean of transcendental knowledge, Vidyavadu Jivanam, it always increases. We always learn more about Krishna. We always learn more about the acharyas. We always learn more about devotional process. So you can understand. So rather than thinking, is it correct or wrong, we should instead think, let me read regularly, let me hear regularly, let me serve regularly, let me chant regularly, so that I'm always becoming more and more perfect in my understanding and in my attitude and in my practice of devotional service. That's the real purport of this point. Does that make some sense, Namrata?
Yes, very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll add one other thing. If there's a major misunderstanding, then in the process of our hearing and chanting sincerely, it will be revealed to us, either within the heart or through the association of devotees. Someone will say, no, that point was wrong. Or I heard you say this in class, but actually the proper understanding is this. And of course, to add all of that, what you're doing is part of this process. You're inquiring to get clarity. You see? So all of these together will make sure that we're always moving in the right direction. Is that okay?
Yes, thank you, Prabhu. Thank you very much. I think I'm still on the stage where things are unclear, but it's part of the process. Slowly, I may get clear about that. Thank you very much.
But I'd also say that clarity, there's specific things you're unclear about, always ask in the association of devotees. So if you're unclear about something, that's where we ask with questions and answers. Prabhu or Mataji, I heard this, but it didn't seem to make sense. Or how is this true? Or why does Prabhupada say this? And then you get the clarity. So that's inquiry as well. Okay.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much. Sometimes just that relating our theoretical knowledge and to the practical thing, certain things like get unclear for the current time. Maybe I wait for a time that I get clear for it. So
yes, it'll come. It will come. If you ask the right questions and practice, the practice will also help to get clarity. Because when the heart's cleaner, it's easier to see the truth. That's why it's important. Yeah.
Correct. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Any other question?
Nice question, Namrata. Nice question. While we are waiting, thank you, Prabhu, and thank you, Namrata. While we are waiting for devotees to think up of whatever it is they would like to ask, I have a question for you, Prabhu.
Yes.
What do we answer people who have been practicing the process, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, still the same old anartha, the same old offensive talk of behaviors, same old bad habits, poor conduct, and so on and so on. And they come and tell you, I don't know, I'm not getting taste. I'm just doing the things as a routine. Somehow, happiness in Krishna consciousness eludes me. I don't know what to do, but what else do I do? So I'm just carrying on. Of course, you wish they would come and ask these questions, but they just carry on just like that without ever asking questions. So I'm just saying, what do we do about people like these who are, hanging on, but they never seem to change or they never seem to improve?
Well, the first thing is people have to understand. We all have to understand the process is a lot more subtle than we realize. So even if someone doesn't think that they're changing at all, that doesn't actually mean that they're not changing. What they may not understand is if they weren't practicing, they would be in a much worse situation. You see, that's the first thing. People don't understand that. They think, oh, well, I haven't got taste. But what they don't know is your karma is such that if you weren't practicing for the past 15, 20 years, not only would you not have taste, you'd have been addicted to this, addicted to that. You'd have had these relationship breakups. You don't know how much was cleaned away because you don't know how much was there in the first place. So that's the first point. The second is that we should be an example ourselves so that we're getting taste, so that we can speak with realization to inspire them. That's the second point. And then the third is that the person has to be willing to really look and see. It's exactly what we spoke about in the class. Is my attitude proper? Because that could be causing an issue. Is my association proper? Because that could be causing an issue. Is my understanding proper? Because that could be causing an issue. Is my abhideya proper? Because that could be causing an issue. What Prabhupada has given is so beautiful for a number of reasons. One of the reasons why it's so beautiful is because you can engage in devotional service in such a way that you can be carried even by the external factors, still spiritual, but what I mean by external, let's say that you're in a great kirtan. You may or may not feel yourself getting purified, but the kirtan was so inspiring that you're there chanting the names of Krishna with other people. You may be engaged in a wonderful service, right? Let's say you're cooking for the devotees. You may or may not be feeling completely purified, but you're doing something that's so inspiring and the devotees are so pleased and they appreciate you and you feel inspired because they're inspired. So it's also the case that one has to see, how are you engaging in this service? What service are you doing? Find a service that inspires and keeps you excited and fully absorbs you. And through the medium of that absorbing service and with good association and the other things that we spoke about, undoubtedly you will feel more inspiration in spiritual life. We cannot get that inspiration by just theory, and we cannot get that inspiration by acting as a bhajana nandi. I just chant, I don't do anything else. No, you need to be in Lord Chaitanya's mission. You need to be in the excitement of Lord Chaitanya's mission, the excitement of giving Krishna to the whole world, and that will help you to get that taste. And by his being pleased, then Sri Krishna Chaitanya Radha Krishna Nahi Anya. Then you'll understand deeply that Radha and Krishna are there and they're pleased as well.
Thank you, Prabhu. Over to Raj. Please go ahead, Raj.
Hare Krishna, please accept my humble obeisances, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Prabhu, the verse particularly mentions remembrance of the lotus feet of the Lord.
Yes.
So is there any difference between remembrance of the lotus feet of the Lord and generally remembrance of the Lord?
In one sense, you could say no. Because the Lord's, let's put it this way, Krishna's lotus feet, you can specifically remember those lotus feet. And he has specific signs on his lotus feet. But that also represents remembrance of him in a mood of submission and service. You see, when we place ourselves at the lotus feet of someone, it means we're remembering or we're positioning ourselves as their servant. That's actually what it means, right? So that's so that's the way to understand it for us. It's not like, Prabhupada wouldn't say, oh, don't worry, you can sit down all day and just remember what Krishna's lotus feet looks like. He'd be like, no, he'd say, make sure you chant Hare Krishna, make sure you do some practical devotional service. That's what Prabhupada would say. And in that way, that's how we'll remember the Lord. Yeah. We have to do it according to our adhikar, but we have to do it.
Yeah. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you very much. Okay, forgive me, I'm gonna take your leave at this point, just because I'm a little bit clash in terms of timing. But I hope it was wonderful to see you. Hope we gave you some food for thought, and look forward to serving you again at some point in the near future.
Thank you, Bhutabhavana Prabhu.
Thank
For
you.
a wonderful class as always. But I'm very sure that people would still like to discuss a little bit more. So maybe those who would like to share their realizations, we can all benefit from hearing them.
Yes.
If you have any doubts and any more clarification, we would be happy to collect it and present it to Bhutabhavana Prabhu for him to answer in our next session. So maybe we'll continue for a few minutes more also, just
Please
for
do.
devotees to benefit from your class.
Please do. I'll take your leave, but any questions, I'm more than happy to help to answer. It's wonderful to serve all of you. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. My humble obeisance. Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Jai Srila Prabhupada. Jai His Holiness Candramauli Maharaj ki jai.
Yeah.
Bhakti Tita Maharaj ki jai.
Thank you very much for today.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Thank you all very much for joining in. Well, if there is any further question, discussion, comment, realization that you all want to share, please feel free. And if there are none, we can also end the class early. But generally speaking, Guru Maharaj likes us to do a proper class. So that's why we are just going to be here and wait for if there is anything more to be said. So we have Tita Kiti Matji, we have Balaji Prabhu, we have Shilpesh, of course we have Namrata and Raj, and then we have Saiteja Chekka. Does anyone know who is Saiteja Chekka? Saiteja Chekka, where are you from? Would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Hare Krishna Mataji, Danut Pranam.
Hare Krishna, pranams to you, Jai Srila Prabhupada.
I'm working currently in India. So, yeah. I was connected to ISKCON during my graduation, and it is related to Pune boys. And from there on, I was connected and practicing.
Very wonderful to have you with us, Saiteja Prabhu. And please continue to keep coming on Guru Maharaj's daily class. Usually it is Guru Maharaj who gives class, except the days he's traveling. Then we have guest speakers who are also very, very advanced devotees like Bhutabhavana Prabhu and Radha Vinodini Mataji and so many other wonderful disciples. So please feel free to join us and keep connecting with His Holiness Candramauli Maharaj.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, you're back, Prabhu.
By some mercy, I think the situation that I was double booked for has slightly adjusted. So itself, by Krishna, it must be by your Guru Maharaj's mercy. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to continue to answer any questions on the class.
Beautiful. So, Bhutabhavana Prabhu, you are in a very strong position to influence a lot of people simply by the virtue of the nature of your service. You are influencing youngsters, you're influencing corporates, you're influencing academicians, influencing, different organizations as well as different departments, even within ISKCON and so on. So what are the things that would you, in your observation of how our movement is growing, what would you like leaders, especially leaders, to learn, to observe, and to attend to in order to take ISKCON to the next level?
It's such a beautiful question, Sri Devi. It's such an incredible. I'll explain something. The call that I was, double booked on is a call with a group of people who I've been teaching for well over a year, and we've been teaching them Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj's Leadership for an Age of Higher Consciousness Part 2 book. That's what we've been studying, and in fact, today's section. Because so the people who were expected, they weren't able to make it, so I could come back. But the section that I was meant to talk about with them is a section called Materialistic Gurus. That's in the Leadership 2 book. And so I've been thinking a lot about leadership and our movement and what could be done differently, or how things can improve. First of all, we should understand that leadership is a real ability. It's not just because it's not that just anyone is automatically good at leading. And a leader's behavior has a disproportionate effect on everyone who follows them. So therefore, we have to train our leaders, actually. We have to train our leaders, and not just and not like in some kind of one-dimensional way. It has to be ongoing training. They have to see the value of it. It has to also practically help them in their service, you see. And also, I was discussing this with I was sharing some insight on this earlier today. You see, there's some signs of bad leadership that we should pick up early. Someone who's too selfish, they can't be a good leader. Someone who can't take feedback. Can you imagine? You put someone in a position of power and you know from day one that they can't take feedback. You must know there's going to be problems. You see? It means that they can't hear from anyone. And you're giving them power and prestige and position and control. It's a recipe for disaster. You see? So the leaders have to have a system around them. I like what I've heard happens in at least some of Radhanath Maharaj's projects, where there's rotating leadership. You see, because leaders have to also be humble and detached. If the leader doesn't have that, if the system doesn't help them to have that, what happens is then even when they're meant to step down, we've all seen it, let's be honest. They're no longer meant to be leading, but they're holding on to power. Yeah, and anyone who tries to remove them, then there's politics and this and that. It's all stuff it's just the same old stuff. But it could be changed if we were more mindful. But that mindfulness is also because as a movement, I've seen, unfortunately, we're not so often in the mode of goodness. We're more in the mode of passion and ignorance. Why do I say that? I say that because in the mode of goodness, you see issues before the issue becomes a major problem. In the mode of goodness, you can start to pick things up early. Oh, this seems to be going wrong. Or, oh, this seems to be off. This seems to be a problem. And you can pick these up early and do a small adjustment that moves everything in the right direction. You see? But if our society is not in the mode of goodness, what happens? There's things going wrong. People are either stick their head in the sand, ignorance, right? Or just think about some covering over in a superficial way, passion. And therefore, the issue just gets worse, although it's just kind of a bit hidden. But after a while, it gets so bad, it becomes a major thing. You see? So I've got a whole thought process on how these things could be solved. Part of it is if we don't reach out nicely in our Sankirtan, we will always have problems. We have some communities and some projects where there are issues in the preaching. Because there's issues in the preaching, there's issues in the person, in the manpower or person power. You see, this is one of the reasons why it can start. You're not doing any outreach. Because you're not doing any outreach, no one is interested, no one's coming forward. Because no one's coming forward, the one or two people who are ready to do any service, even if their behavior can be quite, let's say, not good, because they're the only people who are prepared to do anything, everyone has to go along. You see? Now contrast that. If you have a situation where there's lots of outreach, quality outreach, and many people are coming, Then if someone in a position of authority doesn't behave properly, you got another 20 people, all of whom are equally qualified. And that helps the leader to stay in check, because the leader understands, if I play the fool, there's another 20, you're a brahmachari, you want to play the fool. Okay, there's another 20 brahmacharis from the same university that you went to who are all as equally qualified as you. So you either behave properly or we're going to replace you. Don't think that we're dependent. We're not dependent, you see? So there's many things that could be done. There's so many things that can be done. Leaders need training. My Guru Maharaj actually told that. I was told by my god sister, Raja Leela, my Guru Maharaj, I think he told the leadership of our movement this over 20 years ago, that leaders need proper quality training to do leadership. Otherwise, problems will occur. And we've seen it.
Right, right. Thank you. Thank you again, Prabhu. As a follow-up to that question, since I'm not seeing any other raised hands, if you don't mind, I'd just like to take this a little further. Now, where I am in Mayapur, there's a lot of obviously discussion about, because it's the world headquarters of ISKCON. And many people have written that the GBC is irrelevant to my life. I have no faith in the GBC. The GBC shows over and over again that they put vested interests above the interests of the children in case of the child abuse, or, in other situations. We have some of them outright say we have a corrupt leadership. We have a leadership that doesn't hold itself accountable to what Prabhupada wants us to do. They're not transparent. And in fact, they're actively going against the best interest of certain classes of people because they want to favor someone else and so on. In other words, there is no trust. There is no respect, of course. And there's very little faith that the GBC is even doing its job. What to speak of, taking the lead and leading us into the next century and so on. So with such, and they have done a survey, and they have found widespread mistrust, cynicism, lack of hope, and lack of faith in the leadership. In this vitiated climate where the GBC, and maybe I'm only reading, the skewed population which complains, maybe there's a vast majority which does not have these issues, as full faith, etc., etc. But the very fact that even a section is talking like this is grave cause for concern. So what is your reading about why the GBC has become so alienated? Do you think a public relations exercise is essential, or a coming forward and a transparency procedure or a protocol needs to be in place? What do you think ails the GBC and the common population of ISKCON relationship?
Yeah, I think it goes back to exactly what we spoke about. First of all, I'm not going to criticize or put them down. I don't know why things are the way that they are. I've got my suspicions, but I'm not a GBC, so I don't know the stuff that they have to deal with. And I think that I always have this rule within my mind. I want to seek first to understand. You see, again, I look at, for me, it's crystal clear. I can approach this in the mode of ignorance. I can approach this in the mode of passion, or I can approach it in the mode of goodness. I know that how I deal with other people is how I'm going to be treated in the future. You see? So sometimes it's easy. And I also understand when devotees are upset with their leaders. I understand that too. And sometimes with very, very good reason. Let's be very honest, right? So I'm not going to try and pretend I'm not whitewashing anything. Some things have been done which should not have been done, very clearly. So again, I want to seek first to understand. So I think if we really want to solve the problems forever, not superficially, but like deep, lasting solutions, we have to really dig in. Why has this happened? Right? So again, I studied through the scriptures through these frameworks, and I understood that Krishna was teaching a language of life. So first it's got to be sambandha. What's really going on, right? What's really happening with the leadership? And I mean local as well as, GBC leadership. It's not the case, to be very honest with you, that everyone doesn't have any trust in the GBC. There are people who have trust in certain GBCs, but you know what the irony is? They don't trust them because they're GBCs. They trust them because of who the individual is. I'll give an example. Radha Maharaj. There's a lot of faith and trust in Radha Maharaj. He's a GBC. You see? But the thing is, but they would trust him if he was a GBC, and they would trust him if he wasn't a GBC because of who he is as a person. You see the point? So you do have some people who are GBCs, but that's irrelevant. They're trusted because of their own character, behavior, example, etc.
Absolutely.
So, so again, I think the first thing is Sambandha. We should deeply understand what's really been going on. And when people have made mistakes, we should approach them in such a way that they'll be honest and tell us, all right, to be honest, I shouldn't have done that. The reason why I did it was because I was scared about this, or I was fearful about that, or I felt pressured to do this. Okay, now we understand. I think also in our movement, we make a huge mistake. We often act as if certain personalities are more advanced than they actually are. And therefore we'll expect something of them that's not realistic at their level of advancement. You have Kanishta Adhikari, Madhyam Adhikari, Uttama Adhikari. If we study the scriptures very carefully, it doesn't matter if they've got a position or not. You'll be able to understand, is this a person a Kanishta, or a Madhyam, or an Uttama? And it's got nothing to do with how many years they've been practicing either. You could be a Prabhupada disciple and be a Kanishta Adhikari. It's completely possible. So we have to have our feet on the ground. The Sambandha will help us to understand what's the truth, what's really going on. When we get to the root of what's really going on, because sometimes you even have bad behavior and you think, why are people doing that? There'll be a reason. It doesn't mean it's a good reason. It doesn't mean that they should have done it. No, they probably should have done something else. But if we do a proper investigation, they'll tell you the truth. Actually, you know what? We did this because of this reason, or we felt pressured to do this or do that. And we start to see realistically, this is the truth. This is what's really going on. Only when you understand properly what's going on, then we can create real and lasting solutions that are going to work.
Right.
We often want to jump to fixing everything, but we don't even know what the problem is. You know? And so sometimes devotees, I've seen it. Sometimes devotees will act like, how could they? They're demoniac. Yeah, but you have to understand, if you were in that position, you would probably do something similar. There's an experiment. There was an experiment, I think, at Stanford University. And what they got people to do was so interesting. They looked at how people can let go of their own conscience when they feel that they're under pressure from authority to do something else. There's a study, you may have heard this famous experiment. And so what they did is they would get a person into like a room, into a booth. And they'll tell that person that in the booth opposite you, there's a person who's strapped to an electric chair. In your booth, there's a button. If you press that button, the person in the electric chair will experience a mild electric shock. And they told the person in the booth, don't worry, because you're being told to do it by us, we're the authorities, we're telling you to do it. You don't need to worry. You just do it, even though they're going to get a mild electric shock. You won't be held responsible. You're just following authority. You see? So the people in the booth, by their conscience, they felt awkward or bad about doing it. But because they've been told, you're being told to do it from an authority, and because you're being told to do it from an authority, you're not going to be held responsible. So most of them did it. It wasn't, they weren't really giving an electric shock, but they just wanted to see, can we get these innocent people to do something against their own conscience? So part of it is we have to be very honest and very humble. See, what is easy for us to lack humility and think, I'm such a good person, they're demoniac, they did this, they did that, how could they do that? You wait. If we're not careful, Krishna's like, you think you're so much better than these people? You feel like you're superior? Okay, let me put you into a situation where you feel under pressure to do something that you would not otherwise do, and then you'll be the one pointed at, and everyone's going to tell it, oh look, but how could they do this? So I think we have to be very, very humble. And it means that we're affected by the environment. That's what it means to be a conditioned soul, by the way. Conditioned soul means that I'm affected by the conditions. I'm sure many of us on the call right now, we've worked for material companies, right? Corporate organizations or businesses. And sometimes those organizations, we've seen them do something that we don't agree with, and we've said nothing because we thought, you know what, I need to keep this job. I need to earn money. So I don't agree, you know, or they're mistreating that member of staff. But if I say anything, they'll sack me, you know? We've seen. This is, so I want us to be very humble and very honest. And then what we have to understand is, how do we create the culture such that we're encouraged to do the right thing, and there's many strong obstacles to doing the wrong thing, you know, like that. So to your point, so Davey, one practical thing is transparency. If everyone has to be very transparent, it's harder to go off the rails, because you have to give a report and it's done independently. You see, it's not easy. If you have an independent system, then people won't cover up anymore, because there's an independent body who've got and not just independent, but they've got the power to actually see whatever they want. You see, otherwise, in theory, yes, everyone should speak up, but in reality, no, it's not going to happen. You know, that's what, going back to the example I gave about the rotating chairs in like some of Radha Maharaj's projects. You're going to be the temple president for a year. After a year, you're going to be, someone else is going to be the temple president for the year. There's 4 rotating temple presidents. So that means you can't start playing the fool, because after a year, no matter what you do, you're off. You're taken out of that position. So if you want to start empire building, mistreating people, all of this, you try your best. After a year, you have no power. And then all those people you've mistreated, they'll be like, right, you can't do anything to me now. I'm going to tell you how I really feel about your behavior. So we have to create systems that support the kind of leadership that we want to see in our movement. And we cannot be sentimental about human nature. People can easily be corrupted. Don't think, oh, it's just these evil people and we're all wonderful. No, if you've ever lied before, if you've ever covered up mistakes, if you've ever been dishonest, it means we've got similar anatas where we could go wrong. You know? So we have to set up the system so that there's less likelihood that we'll go wrong. I'll give you an example, practical thing. If it was up to me, no one, I mean, no one could ever be in an official position of leadership if they don't have mentors, but not just mentors who they have an active relationship with and who they're submissive to. Because otherwise, it means that there's no one who can tell that person that they're wrong. And that's a disaster waiting to happen.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. In the olden days, the kings had the council of, very, very qualified, exalted Brahmanas for this reason. Yes. Kshatriyas were the ones in leadership position, but they were always guided by the Brahmanical class. Yeah, Thank you. Well said.
We can do a lot better than we're doing in our movement, but it requires those who are responsible for this to have the will to say, let's start looking at what we can do to improve. And of course, that also means going back to, what did Prabhupada exactly say? What was his instructions? Right? What did he want? How did he say it should be done? How did he set it up? What did he want for the future? Because even the ways Prabhupada set things up in the beginning is different sometimes to what he wanted for the future. I was discussing this with one devotee. People don't know this. Devotees don't know this. There's statements by Prabhupada, and he's talking about how he's given sannyas to unqualified men. He actually says it. He says that you do not normally give sannyas to young unqualified men. He said, but in an emergency situation, you may have to do this. And Prabhupada even went so far as to say, I know that many of you are not qualified for sannyas. He said, normally you don't give 14-year-old boys guns. He said, but in a special wartime situation, you do.
Right.
So people don't know. Sometimes people think, we just copy Prabhupada. No, you don't copy Prabhupada. You do what he said. Because what he did was also sometimes due to emergency circumstances, and it's things that he did in an emergency that he would not want to be done now. You see? Yeah, it requires some depth. Otherwise, we either will ignore all the issues, or we'll put a superficial, plaster on the issue, even though the issue is actually much deeper, and we won't solve it.
Got it. Thank you for a brilliant answer as always. And if this has provoked some thoughts in you all out there, please feel free to jump in and ask maybe we have just a few more minutes, but Bhutabhavana Prabhu will be happy to answer your questions, and we can, get more knowledge that we can use for the future. So does anybody have any further thoughts on this, or even if you have some realizations or you want to share something. Okay, I don't see anybody really raising their hands. So, okay, Shilpesh Prabhu, go for it.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Please accept my humble obeisances. Sorry if I sound a bit funny, I've lost my voice.
Fine, no worries.
I mean, ISKCON from where I'm at seems to be going quite well here. But then obviously you hear about these things that have happened in the past and things that happen today in the leadership, like Mataji mentioned. How do we sometimes process that, thinking, are we in the right place or the right movement if you hear about these unhelpful things sometimes?
Great question. So there's a few things we have to understand. First of all, institution means challenges. You see, people think, naive devotees, I'll be honest, naive devotees think, oh, ISKCON is a spiritual institution, so everyone should behave this and that way. No, not true. In fact, there's letters by Prabhupada where he says exactly the opposite. He said ISKCON is like a hospital. He said they'll be full of sick people, but some people are getting healthy, some people are taking the medicine. So part of the issue is that we don't set our expectations according to Guru Sadhu Shastra. We set our expectations according to our material conditioning. And because our material conditioning is not based upon what's true, therefore, we get very, very disappointed because we come in with a material expectation that has nothing to do with Prabhupada's instructions. Nothing. You see? So the first thing is our expectations should be based upon what Prabhupada actually said. And for that to happen, we have to study. And we have to not just study, we have to inquire. We have to, sometimes if we don't know, we say, well, what did Prabhupada say about this? Or what did Prabhupada expect? I remember my Guru Maharaj saying, sometimes we think, he was talking to devotees, and I think some of his god brothers and god sisters, he said, oh, sometimes we think about the good old days. He said, ISKCON was always full of problems, even in Prabhupada's time. If you study the history, you'll see Prabhupada, if you look at the letters, this person's falling down, this person's doing this person's doing that. Prabhupada, he sometimes couldn't even write his books because he was dealing with problems in our movement. That should help us to understand that we are in the right place. Why do I say that? Because any institution has this. Any institution, and especially when it's voluntary. Because when it's voluntary, you have an extra dimension of issue. What's the extra dimension? The extra dimension is you can't just sack them because you're not paying them in the first place. You see? So there's an extra dimension there. So you have to manage a spiritual institution in a very different way than you would manage a business. You see, that's another factor. So the other thing, so we should be realistic in our expectations that this will happen in any institution, any spiritual institution. And if you study, which I have done some kind of looking into this, you'll find that all spiritual institutions have different types of individuals, some of whom get into positions of leadership and who are not necessarily well behaved. So that's the first point. The second point, which is also interesting, you reminded me of this when you spoke. There are millions of different ISKCONs, to be honest with you, right? What do I mean by that? See, actually, your experience of ISKCON is actually based upon the specific devotees who you associate with. You see, if your close circle of devotees is nourishing, inspiring, and upright, your experience of ISKCON becomes vastly different to when you're in ISKCON and associate with devotees who may be negative. You see? So it's really important which devotees you associate with in the movement. Who are you close to in our movement? The other thing is, ISKCON, people have a different definition of the movement. You see? Now, many people, especially people who have got like a negative feeling about ISKCON, and sometimes with good reason, to be honest, they think ISKCON is the GBC and the structure, the policies, the temples. I actually don't think that. I think that's a small part of ISKCON. ISKCON is actually you and I. You see, ISKCON is us. It's the community of devotees. International Society, Prabhupada says, society. International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So ISKCON actually is the individual devotees. It's a community, global community of individual devotees. And of course, there's also a GBC. There are also temple buildings and projects. There are also policies. But depending on how you define ISKCON, That has a big role to play on how you see it. So you'll see that often the devotees who got very hurt or upset, it wasn't specifically one thing or another. It's because the people that they associated with in our global community had that impact. It's whoever your heart is open to that will shape your emotional life, and therefore in many cases your devotional life. That's the truth. So one of the most important things that we can do is choose our association wisely and have realistic expectations of devotees based upon Guru Sadhu Shastra, not based upon my material conditioning. If you have that, then what happens, like you said, Shilpesh, then even if you hear about things, you still feel, you know what, but my devotee friends, my devotee association is inspiring, nourishing, energizing. I feel it's bad what's happening there, but I'm not giving up Krishna consciousness. You see? There are millions of ISKCONs. Even though everyone is in the same movement, they're not having the same experience within the movement, because it depends on which devotees you are close to, which devotees are your authorities in this movement. That's actually why every devotee has their own unique flavor of experience in ISKCON. You see? So if you don't want to become disgruntled or disappointed, we should make sure that we consciously choose the best association we can have in the community of devotees. You see? And if you do that, then you'll be protected from even negative things. So you'll hear about it, but you'll have such a wonderful experience in your part of ISKCON that you'll feel like that's wrong. We should see what we can do to improve that. But I'm still inspired. I'm still energized. I still feel strong. I still feel enthusiastic about Lord Chaitanya's mission. But if you're in an association of devotees who are just very negative, hurt, wounded, corrupt, or not healing or not growing, then you can easily be brought down. Then you'll be in the same movement, but you'll have a very, very different flavor of experience. Does that answer your question, Shilpesh?
Yeah, that's really helpful.
There's one other thing I want to add, and that is also that we should consider that it is our responsibility to improve the community of devotees. And that comes primarily by our own spiritual advancement. Okay, that's primarily. And then along with that, where we can actually help in some practical way, we should also do so.
Sometimes there's a devotee who's in a position of leadership that everybody else likes, but I myself might not have the same feelings towards. So that's okay. I can just put that aside, let them do what they're doing, and other people reciprocate with that person. I don't have to do that. That's correct, isn't it?
So say that again, but I don't
have to maybe look up to that person the way other people do. Just put it aside.
It depends on what role they are playing. We should respect all in positions of authority. What we're actually respecting is the position. You see? There's a position, then there's a person who's in the position. So we want to respect the position so we can cooperate as a movement. Therefore, Prabhupada talks about love and trust. Now, at the same time, we may think that this person who's in a position of responsibility could do this better or could do that better. Fair enough. We're not being told to close our eyes and be blind, but we want to appreciate what they are doing. And also what you'll find is often by appreciating what the person can do, you're more likely to be able to influence them to improve. Think about it. If you were in a position of authority and someone saw that you could improve in some way, but they just always criticized you and didn't appreciate how hard you're trying anyway, you're less likely to change for them, isn't it? You see, this is what I meant by understanding human nature and being honest about how people are. If someone's criticizing you all the time, even though you're trying your best, and they say, you should do this, you should do that, you'll feel hurt. You'll feel like, don't you know I slept 5 hours last night, and for the last week I slept only 5 hours. I'm dealing with this problem and this problem. I'm being criticized. You don't care, and you're just telling me that I'm always wrong. They'll feel hurt, and they won't be willing to. They'll feel that I'm already overwhelmed. So we have to treat everyone, understanding that for most people, we're still on the human platform. We have emotions, feelings, we have false ego. So we should try to interact in such a way with others that they feel inspired to improve. And we should also try to improve ourselves. then we'll get the best outcome that we can get. And if you're in a position of authority and someone does something wrong, and it's your duty to address it, then also you should address it. You know, if you're not in a position and someone's done something wrong, you may tell someone who can address that authority. You know, but along with that, we have to keep a certain detachment, because ultimately, Krishna will allow or not allow something to turn out a certain way according to his own time frame. Right? That's it. We're not God. We can't force everything to be exactly the way that we think it should be, but we can offer the best that we can. Make sense? Thank you.
Wow, such powerful discussions we're having over here. Thank you. Thank you so much, Bhutabhavana Prabhu. And I'm so happy that all this is getting recorded for future. Thank you so much. So we will wrap up for today, Bhutabhavana Prabhu. Thank you so much for coming back on after finding out that you could have made other choices and say, oh, I'll attend to something else or do something else, but you were kind enough to come back. So thank you very much. And we wish you all a very good afternoon for those of you in UK, and a very good evening for those of you in India. And we thank Bhutabhavana Prabhu and look forward to more. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Hare Krishna.
Our humble obeisances. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Thank you, devotees. We'll end the call now.